what on earth does it mean to greet one another with a holy kiss? Dr. Ken Berding, I was in Russia probably 20 or 25 years ago, and I saw the pastor greet a man in his congregation with a kiss on the lips. And since my culture is very different, and this is 25 years ago, I hid it with my body, but inside was like, what is going on? Is that a holy kiss? So I'm eager to know your biblical take on this because you've done a deep dive. But before we get your take, what are some different ways that scholars make sense of what this even means or looks like?
Right. So I think all scholars think that Paul is actually encouraging them to greet one another with some sort of kiss greeting and to keep it holy. So that's what he's doing. He does it. Paul does it 4 times, and of Romans, and of 1 Corinthians, and of 2 Corinthians, and of 1 Thessalonians. And Peter says this once. So obviously it was a thing for Paul. He thought it was important.
Do you think this is a cultural thing, or do you think there's what we might call trans-cultural implications that we should still greet with a kiss, but keep it holy?
Yeah, I think it is cultural.
Okay.
Truthfully, Sean, everything in the Bible is cultural to some degree.
Fair enough.
The question is, to what degree does it have things that are transcultural? And I do think that there are some transcultural things in this passage. I'll just get right to those if you'd like them.
Yeah, let's
I think
do it.
transcultural, I think we need to greet each other warmly in the Lord, in whatever way is appropriate. I think that we need to treat each other as brothers and sisters. And I think that we need to make sure that we keep it holy when we do it.
Okay, so your take is more so it's not a kiss. If a hug or a handshake or some other greeting was affectionate and it's done in a holy manner, that would fulfill the commandment that Paul is giving.
Sure, unless you live in the Middle East where people regularly kiss on both cheeks. I lived in the Middle East for a while. And you should probably greet that way if you're living in the Middle East. That would be men with men and women with women. If you live in a place like Spain or France where they kiss, probably crossing the gender lines, as long as you're making sure you keep it holy, that would be appropriate too. In my culture, we don't do that so much. Actually, I live in Southern California where there's a lot of subcultures as well.
That's
so
true.
Some people do, and it depends upon their family. You know, nevertheless, most people don't. My brother visited not so long ago, and when he came in the door with my sister-in-law too, I just gave him a big kind of hug. I hadn't seen him for a while. My sister-in-law, a big hug. That's what we would do. We wouldn't even think about a kiss.
Fair enough. Now, I think you said this appears 4 times. Paul talks about it. At least one is in 2 Corinthians chapter 13, where verse 12 says, greet one another with a holy kiss. Is there anything going on about the context, either in the passage or the culture, that would help us understand this?
Yeah, there's a couple things that we need to think about. The culture is helpful, and the passage itself is helpful. The thing in the passage that is most helpful, I think, is that he's mentioning them in all 4 passages as adelphoi. So that's brothers or brothers and sisters. In fact, most of the time that it shows up in the New Testament, it is inclusive. It's kind of like hermanos in Spanish, where it's speaking to brothers and sisters. And he's saying to greet them that way. So his model is the family. So there's different kinds of kissing that's going on in the first century. You're not kissing strangers typically, and it's a little bit different in the Greco-Roman settings as it is in the Jewish settings. But there's like the real deference types of kisses where you would go up to someone, grab their hand, and kiss it like that, or really you go all the way down on the ground and kiss their feet or something like that. Paul doesn't have that in mind at all. He's modeling after the family type of kissing. So there's a lot of ancient texts that talk about kissing between, parents to their children, children to their parents, brothers to brothers, sisters to sisters, brothers to sisters, and also beyond that, like aunts and cousins. And so all of those, a lot of that's going on. A lot of it's on the cheek. Some of it's on the lips. And that's the background that Paul's working from. So Paul really cares about them thinking about themselves as the family of God. It's his favorite metaphor, brothers and sisters. I mean, he's got other metaphors for what the church is, but the one that he just throws off all the time is that you're brothers and sisters. The thing is, it's kind of radical because that's not what people did. It was a segregated society. It was a class society. There were distinctions, and you didn't cross those. And by encouraging them to greet one another with a holy kiss, he is radically crossing those lines. And that's really significant. So that's really, the family is the setting. In fact, it's so comfortable that once you get out into like the 3rd century, the church leaders are like, all right, enough of this. This isn't good.
Are you serious?
And they segregated it, and they said, okay, no more cross-gender kissing. Okay, I need to back up a little bit on this. It is not clear to me in the 1st century whether they were actually gender kissing. I can't figure that out.
Fair enough.
Craig Keener thinks probably yes. And if anyone would know, it would be Craig. But I'm not sure. I haven't been convinced yet as I've been looking at it. But Paul says, greet one another with a holy kiss. Does that mean keep it men with men and women with women? Or does it mean when you do it, just make sure that you're careful to keep it holy?
It's interesting how you indicate that kisses can mean different things.
Right.
Like a kiss in the hand means something different than a kiss on the foot. And that seems to cross different cultures. Right. And I'll talk to my high school students about the question, how far is too far? And one of the points that I make is that physical actions actually carry certain inherent meaning. And so if you're trying to create this community in which there's rich and poor, Jew and Gentile, slave and free, but treat another as brothers and sisters who are equals, it seems like a greeting of a kiss. That's why it's so revolutionary. And it would seem to me, how else could you think of a kiss that wouldn't be on the cheeks that has parity, right? Apart from, I guess, maybe on the lips at times.
Yeah, I agree. In the 1st century, there were different kinds of kisses. On the hand would be for somebody who is someone higher in society than you or someone older than you. When we lived in the Middle East, we would go up and kiss older men or older women on their hands. In the 1st century, you would have like a rabbi or a teacher, maybe in a Roman school or something like that. They would kiss their students on their heads. That's kind of a different kind of thing. And you can just tell that there's a difference. But Paul, he's the founder. He's the father of these churches. And he's not expecting them to show the deference that you would think that you would expect from him. He does occasionally assert his authority as their father, as their spiritual father. But in words, he doesn't expect them to come up and treat him that way. It seems like he really wants parity. And that's what makes this really interesting.
So you're right that all biblical teachings have a cultural element to them. Some commands are uniquely for a particular culture. Others clearly are transculture for everybody, like if it's grounded in creation, etc. This seems to be one, if I'm understanding you, for which there are certain cultural applications of it, but there's something transcultural, namely treat other believers as brothers and sisters and let your greeting be affectionate and yet holy and reflect that. Is that a fair summation of what you think Paul's getting at?
That's fantastic. I had a person, after he read my blog post on my personal blog, he reached out to me and he said, I really care about obeying what the Bible says. And I was really struggling with this passage. Because I was thinking, should I start actually kissing people in the church? And he really got some help from it. I actually know, I learned how to shake hands, like solid handshakes from a pastor, because I didn't used to shake hands well. Actually, I really struggled with how to greet people coming back from living in the Middle East for 7.5 years.
I could see that.
I didn't know how. In fact, I'd been greeting men with kisses. They're not real kisses. You need to understand that, right? It's just like, you just make sounds, but it's just cheek to cheek. And I came back and there was an old friend I hadn't seen for a long time. He's coming up toward me and I'm about to come toward him and I have to stop and I can't say, oh, I felt like kissing you, but I mean, after 7 years overseas, there was this just change, and I didn't know how to do it. I didn't know how to handle it when like a woman came up and gave me a hug in the church, an older woman. Even that wasn't comfortable for me. And just finally, after about after about 20 years living back in
Oh
the
my
States,
goodness.
I began to feel more comfortable and figure out what I should do in our very complex Southern California mixed cultural setting.
It definitely is. So last question, when we come across a passage like this, how do you know that it's really not meant to be give a kiss itself to everybody? How do you know we're supposed to take it the way that you and I just described?
Well, this one's a little harder than some, because typically the way that you do that is you look for other passages that help to reinforce it.
Mm-hmm.
And since he repeats it 4 times, and Peter's got it there, it looks like it's actually reinforcing it. I think you have to go back in this type of thing and ask, what is it actually doing?
Mm.
And I think you have to do that. Everyone has to do that. And you're not doing it as a way of trying to explain it away.
Of course.
I really don't believe that. We really need to, really root in and say, whatever God wants me to do, I will do it, even if it's uncomfortable. Having said that, in this case, he is trying to encourage them to act like brothers and sisters in the Lord, and to show warmth in the church, and to keep it holy along the way. And we can't really do that very well in our settings by kissing each other in the church. I think it would actually work against it.
I love it. Super helpful. We will link to your article. Thanks for unpacking that passage with us.